What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Before this video starts, I just want to let you know that I tried to fix the audio as much as I could. This was made before I had a decent microphone. This was actually the microphone I used to make it, but this video took about 3 days to make when I made it at the beginning of the year. And I'm actually making a video for Jack and Daxter the same way I made this video. So if you want to watch this video, this will give you an idea about how much detail and how much time is being put into the Jack and Daxter video. So if you enjoy this video, like, comment, subscribe. This was originally posted on vidme, so excuse any vidme lingua I said, such as upvote and follow instead of like or subscribe. So yeah, enjoy the video. It started with a man named Gunpei Yokoi, who wanted to take gaming on the go. He said whatever the NES can do, he can do in this tiny rectangle bulk of motherboard, and since nobody thought his idea of a pocket-sized NES would succeed, but his invention would blow away all expectations. This is the story of the number 3 best-selling gaming platform of all time, the Game Boy and its creator.
Game Boy doesn't just lead the handheld gaming market, it owns it.
The year is 1965, and a man named Hiroshi Yamauchi is the head of a playing card manufacturer named Nintendo. This man ran everything at the time, and any new idea that came had to pass by through him. A few years later, a man named Gunpei Yokoi was hired to make sure the assembly lines and conveyors all worked properly. He was a loyal, hard-working man who just so happened to go home every night and experiment with making toys and short circuits. Break room water cooler talk got around, and it didn't take long for Yamauchi to take notice, and he came to Gunpei Yokoi and asked him if he thought he could make a toy for Nintendo to sell. He said sure, and his first invention was a mechanical arm that could be used to grab and pick up things. It was called the Ultra Hand and released in 1970. It sold over 1 million units in the holiday season of 1970. Gunpei Yokoi would go on to become the Shakespeare of the modern age. On August 28, 1980, Nintendo released another Gunpei invention, the Game & Watch, which resembles what would later become the Nintendo DS and the Nintendo 3DS XL. The Game & Watch brought classics such as Manhole and a port of Donkey Kong, had a lifespan of 10 years and sold 40 million units over that time, making Yokoi a star at Nintendo. What he said he would do, he made, and he made it popular and very inexpensively. In 1983, Nintendo released the Famicom in Japan, and it came to the USA in 1985 as a Nintendo Entertainment System. The console was a hit and would go on to sell 50 million copies in its lifetime. At this point, Gunpei Yokoi put all his focus in bringing the power of the NES to the palm of your hand. Gunpei Yokoi and his team, who invented the classic Metroid, met in a room and started thinking about how they could and would create the Game Boy. Inspired to reinvent this off of his creation of the widely successful Game & Watch. He knew everything to expect in inventing the Game Boy. The only thing he didn't see coming was the success that it would have. It was 1989, and Yokoi was finishing work on a special project. And at this point, Nintendo owned 97% of the gaming market, and the market had blown up past expectations, and the Game Boy was launched at a price of $169.99. The Game Boy was an instant hit. The Game Boy was an unstoppable force, and just like all unstoppable forces in history, it didn't do it alone. It had an ally named Tetris, which was bundled with the Game Boy. It didn't take long for invading forces to appear. Atari came out with the Lynx at the same time, and its only thing over the Game Boy was that it had a color screen and a bigger screen. The Lynx had a more powerful system, but it quickly found itself in bargain bins around the world and falling apart, while the Game Boy continued to soar. In 1991, Sega brought out new competition, the Sega Game Gear, which was similar to the Lynx, but it took more battery life and costed more. The Game Boy came out on top with its large library of games and long-lasting battery life, which brought it to 32 million cells by 1992. By December 1992, the Atari Lynx and the Sega Game Gear was dead and gone. In 1994, the Super Game Boy came out, which was just a cartridge for the Super NES that you could insert your Game Boy games into and play them on your TV, instead of the high color and sleek SNES games. Sega released a new, more powerful system called Sega 32X, which allowed for bigger games, better sound, and better graphics. So by all means, it was set to outsell a small cartridge like the Super Game Boy, but instead the 32X sold just over 300,000 units, and the Super Game Boy Nintendo counting after 2 million units. Nobody could figure out why people wanted to play their Game Boy games over a new system. In 1995, color came to the Game Boy, but as a colored Game Boy, not a color screen. Peter Main, the CEO president of Nintendo, did the first known troll in the world of gaming by announcing the colored Game Boy by saying, "You people are always asking, when are we coming out with a colored Game Boy? We now have one." And then unveiled a Game Boy of color instead of a colored screen. People loved it, and once again, Game Boy sales skyrocketed. A few months later, the Game Boy Pocket was released, and it brought along smaller batteries and a better screen and a longer life. Nintendo and Gunpei Yokoi seemed unstoppable, but that wasn't until Yokoi invented the first virtual reality headset called the Virtual Boy. He wanted to make games 3D, and he wanted to stop playing a screen and start playing in the world. But this invention had some flaws. Its only colors was red and black. It wasn't able to be moved, so sales suffered and it gave people headaches and it failed. Nintendo left Yokoi behind after this, giving him a window seat, which in Japan, if you fail, they don't fire you. They give you a window seat and give you things to occupy yourself, but they won't let you give ideas and meetings. By 1996, everyone was amazed by the new Nintendo 64 and forgot about Yokoi, but he wasn't beat. He was down and had his sight on victory, so he set out to make a new invention which would lead Gunpei Yokoi to leave Nintendo. He created a new company called Koto, and he went back to creating things again, so he made a new game system called the Wonder Swan. Unfortunately, on October 4th, 1997, Gunpei Yokoi was standing outside his car and was murdered by a maniac in a car. His death resonated through the gaming industry. He was a father, a husband, a friend to many, and the man who launched handheld gaming. He made it possible for games on our phones to be an idea, because without the success of the Game & Watch, nobody would have thought to bring games to our pocket. Nintendo decided to bring his work back to life in the form of the Game Boy Color, but wouldn't release it until it had as good of battery life as the original Game Boy. When the Game Boy Color was finally released, it succeeded with a new ally, and this ally was the Pokemon series, which put a Game Boy in the hands of essentially every kid in America and every kid across the first world countries of the USA, Canada, and Japan. Nintendo still had their sights on keeping Yokoi alive by driving his work even further and using similar design to Wonder Swan. They started Project Atlantis, which was the code name for the Game Boy Advance, which was actually finished being developed by the end of the first year of the Game Boy Color, but due to the sales being so good for the Game Boy Color, they wanted to hold back on release. On June 11, 2001, the Game Boy Advance released and took less than 5 days to sell over 500,000 units for just $99. Anybody could buy it due to its cheap price. On March 23, 2003, Nintendo released the Game Boy Advance SP, a flip screen and backlit redesigned version of the Game Boy Advance, and in just its first year, it sold 6.5 million units. At the Game Developers Choice Awards of 2003, the work of Gunpei Yokoi was honored, and he was given the Lifetime Achievement Award, which was given to his son.
Lifetime Achievement. If my father were able to attend the ceremony, the joy that I could feel as his son would have been something no words of mine could ever express. To him, and thank my Father in heaven, to whom I have an ever-increasing feeling of love and respect. Thank you.
When all of Gunpei Yokoi's ideas for Game Boy was gone, Nintendo embarked on the Nintendo DS, which was still inspired by Yokoi's Game & Watch, and later on other Gunpei Yokoi ideas would resurface and be reborn and launched as the Nintendo Wii U and the Nintendo Switch. To this day, the Game Boy in all its variants has sold over 160 million units worldwide. There may not ever be another Gunpei Yokoi, but his work will always live on in our hearts and in our games. Whether we're bored in class and pull out our phone and play a game, or you're playing your handheld Nintendo, whether it be a Game Boy or DS, or if you're riding in the subway from Tribeca to Financial and you're playing your Switch to pass the time. We all owe these luxuries to Gunpei Yokoi, the man who made Nintendo and the man who made childhoods fun and memorable to people across the world. And from all of us, arigato gozaimasu to Mr. Yokoi.